Number 19, suppose that the equation v equals 20.8 x squared minus 458.3 x plus 3,500 represents the value of a car from 1964 to 2002. What year did the car have the least value? And it says x equals 0 in 1964. So in other words, it's giving us the y-intercept. Okay, because when x is 0, that's what y-intercept means. So it's when x equals 0. So that's our starting amount. So we're starting in 1964. If we drive over here to the equation, we're going to notice that the y-intercept's right there, the 3,500. Because if we plugged in x, 0 for x for both of these instances, that would be 0 minus 0, which is nothing, plus 3,500, so that is our y-intercept. I'd like to show you two ways to do this. So the first way is going to be without a calculator, and without a calculator you can just make a table, and in your table we'd have 20.8x squared minus 458.3x plus 3,500, and then we have our x and our y over here. Now remember, x is 0 is 1964, and we already know that would be 3,500 if I plugged in a 0 for x. We could plug in a 1, and 1 squared is 1, so that would just be 20.8 times 1, which is 20.8. And then plug in a 1 right there, and we'd get minus 458.3 plus 3,500. And you might get to this step and say, I have a calculator, so I could continue this out and do it by hand, and that's how you would do it. You keep on plugging them in. I would plug in your answer choices, so you know 1965 is 1, and then you can figure out 1970 and 75 just from subtracting from 1964. For instance, 1970 minus 1964, I would plug in, not a 2, but I would plug in a 6 for x, and that would be my next input for my table. Then I could try 1975, that's answer choice C, minus 1964 gives me 11, and I could plug that in for my x. And we have one more, 1980. If I plugged in 1980 minus 1964, I would get 16 for my last x value. And then all we would have to do is compare our 1, 2, 3, 4 values that we get and see which one is the least. So that's the way to do it by hand. And yes, you would probably want to type these numbers in your calculator to be efficient on this test. Alright, let's talk about how we can do it with a calculator. Alright, you're going to get your calculator out and you're going to go to y equals, and then we're going to type in our function 20.8x squared minus 458.3x plus 3,500. Then we're going to press second graph. Second graph is right there on the calculator. It's the top right button after you hit the second button. And that's going to give us table. Table is the word written above there, and that gives us exactly what we were doing by hand. And we know what to plug in for x. So when we hit second graph, it's going to show you the x's and the y's. And we're just looking for when x is 1, when x is 6, when x is 11, and 16. We're going to find those y values. And I scrolled down, and these are the 4 values I got for those inputs of x. Remember, x is the number of years since 1964. So if you scroll down for those actual numbers, you would definitely get this problem wrong. You have to, again, subtract that year from 1964 from the year that you're given in the answer choices, and that told us what we were looking for x. So which one's our lowest value? I see 1499, that's pretty low. That one's lower, and then that one jumps back up. So 975.5 is going to be my lowest, and that's when x equals 11. When does x equal 11? In 1975. And what a great year that was. Oh wait, I wasn't even born then. Alright, let's jump over to number 20. Which expression is equivalent to x to the 1/3 power raised to the negative third power? Alright, so if we have an exponent on the outside of parentheses, we are going to multiply it. So it's really going to be x to the 1/3 times negative third. When I say times negative third, I mean I'm multiplying the two exponents there. So negative 3 times 1 gives me negative 3, and then 3 times 1, I'm just multiplying across, 3 times 1 gives me 3. And negative 3 over 3 can be reduced very easily. Negative 3 divided by 3 is negative 1. So that's really just x to the negative 1. And if you'll recall, you cannot have negative exponents. So to write that as a positive exponent, we want to write it on the other side of the fraction. Well, notice I don't have a fraction here, so I need to make one. So that's going to move to the other side, and so to the bottom. So it would be x to the first power now. And nothing is on top, but I know this value isn't 0, so I don't put a 0 there, I put a 1 on top. So anytime you don't have something on the top, you put a 1. Otherwise, you're making that value 0. So that would just be 1 to the x power. And that's answer choice B. And honestly, this one's probably more complicated with the calculator. If you just know your exponent rules, this one is pretty easy to solve. And just remember, the knowledge of exponents can bring power. After all, that's how money and interest are calculated.